this. Alright, I should have us both set up. Yeah, I'm gonna go and announce it now.
Awesome. Yeah.
Finally.
Doing the same.
That wasn't bad. Sometimes when you have technical issues, you just have to like completely reschedule and cancel. Like, at least we've got it working.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just take your tweet and just change it to @you instead. Roman Papush.
Okay, yeah, we're finally here. I've done everything I needed to do, and I'm ready to talk. Waiting for you.
Yep, I'm just gonna grab a link to the live stream. Live now. Copy and put this on Twitter.
Oh, dude, you should stream Ludum Dare. Yeah, that's a great idea. For me to lose all my nerves.
Oh yeah, so yeah, have you ever streamed doing game jam stuff?
No, this is my first stream ever.
At all.
Of
Yeah.
anything.
Okay. Yeah, over time I've streamed a few different things. I've streamed just like working on website stuff, just working on game stuff.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, you started your channel doing basically like a lot of things, like not only Unity, but like Blazor stuff, and like, yeah, how do you like cope with like doing all that, and like how do you pick the theme? Like right now, I guess you like more or less doing Unity, like solely, right?
Yeah. So when I started the channel, it was just Unity at the start because I just got into Unity. It was the main thing I was programming in, was doing C# in Unity, and I was just showing off some things I made in my games, the kind of stuff you do on Twitter and whatever, you know, like, oh, here's some cool part of my game. But this was like when I just started learning, so my cool things were not very cool. But the point is, I was happy about them, so I was showing them off on YouTube. And then some people were like, oh, hey, you should do tutorials. Because at the time, they were just like clips, no audio, just something in a game that looks kind of cool. And then I considered the person or the people that were, you know, asking to do tutorials. And then I'd started doing tutorials. And then it was Unity for the start. And then after a while, I wasn't bored of doing Unity, but I thought, hey, you know, let's try some other coding stuff at the same time. And one thing I'd recently learned around that time was about like making Discord bots, and I, you know, liked Discord. We had a Discord server. I thought, hey, people might like.
That's a popular topic. Yeah.
People might like Discord bot tutorials, so I did some of those, and they became really popular. But they kind of died out quite fast as well. Like the thing with Unity is there's so many things you can do content about. Like it's such a broad thing, game dev. With Discord bots, it's quite limited. You know, once someone knows how to run a Discord bot and like do some common things like grab a user and send them a message, you can pretty much make everything. Like you can do anything. People come to me with really complex seeming questions about Discord bots, and it's usually just a case of like reusing the stuff they already know. Whereas with Unity, I still don't know most of the stuff there is to know. You know, there's so many things. You never run out of content ideas.
How did you come into Unity? You were programming before that, right?
So let me think about the timeline here. So it's 2020 now. So I finished high school in 2019. So probably around 2017 is when I started Unity. 2017, because that was when I started programming, and like immediately, well, at school it was Python, and that was cool.
Yeah.
That was nice. That like at least got me into it, and then I decided I wanted to make games. I already kind of knew that from the get-go. Like, you know, it'd be cool if I could use this programming to make games. So I looked up.
I believe anyone who's in their teens, like thinking about that. You know?
Yeah. Because whenever I'm playing games, I'm always thinking about like, I wonder how they made that, or like, it'd be cool if I could.
Yeah.
So then I was obviously doing a lot of googling about like, oh, what game engine should I use? The first thing I actually messed around with was Game Maker Studio. You know, Game Maker Studio, right? Yeah. I messed around with that a little bit.
People are still making big games with that engine, yeah.
Yeah, like, I guess I liked it, but I wasn't satisfied because I mainly wanted to do 3D stuff. And because it has its own scripting language, it's, like, then more difficult to use other things because it's nothing else uses, I think it's GD script or something, like, I can't remember what it means. Like, well, it's Is it GD Script? No, that's Godot. Sorry, that's a different engine.
It's good OP, yeah.
Yeah, I've tried Godot as well a little bit, but I always come back to Unity. Let's put it that way. Like, because everything I want to do in other engines, I think like, well, I can do this in Unity, but better. Like,
Yeah.
so at least for the time being,
Exactly.
I'm sticking with Unity when making anything like serious. Yeah. So how did I come to Unity? Yeah, it was just Google. It was Google, and obviously you have the question of, do I use Unreal? Do I use Unity? Well, I tried Unreal, and I had quite a few problems with like compile time and just like the engine being less lightweight. It does a lot more. I was glad at the time there were a lot more like cool features in it. Like their shader thing at the time was so much better because Unity didn't have one built in, and their like animation and just a lot of the stuff was there that was missing from Unity. But then over the last 2 years, they've added packages for like everything you need. So, and that's because of packages as well. It is more lightweight because you just add and remove what you need. So yeah, Unity's going in the right direction. I think.
Yeah. Since Unity started doing their naming scheme like yearly, they're like they pull the game up really. I've tried Unreal too, and for me it's just the same compiling time, and it was just spinning my fans so hard. Even like the empty scene, it was like. So yeah, Unreal, I haven't touched it for like maybe 3 years. When they first came onto the scene with Unreal 4, and even before they became completely free, I tried it then. And yeah, I haven't touched it still. But as for Unity, first time, I'm 34 right now, and the first time I remember I started Unity, I was 27, so it's like 7 years ago. But then I kind of haven't touched it for a couple of years, then I came back to it, then I haven't touched it for a couple of more years, and now like last 2 years I'm like almost daily doing Unity stuff. So that's like what's the route for me.
Yeah, like the thing with Unreal, I just found it harder to get started with, and like with Unity, I mean, with any game engine, when you load it up, you're just in an empty scene. Like, what do I do now? You know, I just found it a lot easier in Unity to get going. When you are in Unity and you right click and you get the create menu for everything you can create. I understand there are a lot of things there that might be confusing, but I just like how you click it and it says something about, you know, make a C# script, and then you write some code and it can do anything. In Unreal, unless you're actually writing your code for everything, because of blueprints, I understand blueprints are kind of easier to use for prototyping, but there's blueprints for everything. So like there's different types of blueprints for the different things you're making. And I understand people who've used it like properly might not find it as confusing, but because I guess I didn't put enough time in, I got really confused. Like, what should I be doing? I think you have to like relearn like best design practices for Unreal, like how you do certain things. It's just, I found it all weird. And with the visual scripting, I like coding, you know, I don't want to be dragging and dropping like to code.
Yeah, exactly the same thing. Yeah, I tried blueprints, but I couldn't get like too much into it because like when your project grows big, you can't
Tangled
like
mess.
handle like 2,000 nodes. Yeah, you know.
People call it spaghetti code when it's actual code, but it's even more spaghetti code when it's literally all these lines crossing over each other and like, you know, all these nodes everywhere. Yeah, I just, it wasn't for me. I know some people like it, and I see some really cool things made in Unreal. Obviously, it's like a serious AAA game engine. I feel like a lot of the companies that use it have like modified versions of the engine because it's open source, or they know things that I don't know about how to cut down compile time. Because every time I recompiled the C# script, a C++ script, it took ages. Like Unity, you save your changes now, and sometimes it's recompiled before you even tab back into Unity. I'm like expecting the little recompile logo, and it's just not there, and I'm wondering, did I not make any code changes? And I'm like, no, it's already compiled. Oh wow, like it's that fast sometimes. I'm just gonna quickly.
Exactly. Yeah, that's one of the reasons. Like when I see videos people making like why I left Unreal for Unity or something like that. Yeah, that's always comes like the top one, like compiling times.
Yeah, I'm just realizing I'm kind of off center on my webcam. I'm sure no one cares. It's just some little picky detail I've noticed.
Yeah, absolutely.
No one cares. All right.
So are you making anything right now? I mean, like your own projects besides doing YouTube. Like, do you have any of your like games or prototypes or something?
So yeah, in my own time, I've got kind of two things on the go. One thing is so I'm making a multiplayer game. Now that's already like more difficult than making a single player game. But I'm trying to keep the reason. Okay, one of the main problems people have is scope, right? They pick a project that's too hard to do and they never finish it. I found that.
Yep, we were just talking about that. Yeah.
I find that actually making a multiplayer game, if you do it right, can actually make it smaller scope. Because let's imagine you're making a multiplayer game. Okay, so my problem is when you're making, let's say, a MMORPG, everyone wants to make an MMORPG, right? Like, it's just impossible on your own. It just is. The problem is not just the fact that there's all these complex systems, but it's also content. You know, if you make an MMO and you build everything, and then you realize, wait, my players actually want like items and spells and all this content, and then you have to go make that. If you're making a multiplayer game and it's not an MMO, like, then I feel like you can limit yourself. So the game I was making, have you ever played Stick Fight the game, or you've seen that maybe?
Yeah.
I want to go for, it's not, so like think of that but 3D with magic instead of guns. So it's like short rounds, small maps, and you die, you're dead until the next round, last player standing, yeah, that kind of thing. And it's just a case of you spawn in, you pick up like staffs and rings and other magical equipment, whatever, and then you cast cool spells, and then people die. So like that is basically the scope, right? It's just all I need to get done is the combat, and then that's really the entire game. I don't have to worry about quest systems and inventory systems and da-da-da. Like, at the end of the day, it's just really simple. You pick something up, you attack with it, and you're done. So, even though it's multiplayer...
How far along are you in that?
I mean, you could argue the prototype's there in the sense that you can make a lobby, people can join your lobby, and then you can spawn in and hit people. The problem I was having with it is... So, do you ever use additive scene loading in Unity? Or do you just do normal scene manager.load scene there? Yeah, so I always just use normal load scene. I've heard benefits of additive stuff. I just have never used it. And I'm in the Discord server for Mirror, which is the multiplayer thing I use. And I've got some videos on it too. And in their server, one of the people who like develop it, because it's open source, was telling me, because he watches the channel, because I'm one of the few people who actually make content on it. So if he's working on it, he's like giving me pointers and saying, actually, this, da-da. So one thing he was talking about was additive scenes. How, multiplayer, there's a lot of things in like how it works. You've got to like make sure all the people in your like thing are synced in terms of scenes, if they're meant to be, and that like everything you spawn in is in the right place, There's always tricks for doing things. Like if you have a projectile, you don't have like every frame update the position on all the networks. When it's spawned, you just tell the other people to spawn it at the right place with the right velocity. And on the server, it's the real thing. On theirs, it's like a ghost version. It's like this projectile doesn't actually do anything apart from just look cool. Whereas on the server, it has the logic for collisions and dealing damage and stuff. And
when you start doing physics, that's when it gets interesting. Because I tried like maybe a year or 2 years ago, I wanted to try multiplayer, and at that time I don't know if Mirror was there because I haven't heard about Mirror until you told me. And so I was trying to use Photon Bolt, I guess. They bought there is Photon networking, and they bought another like networking system. It was called Bolt, and now it's Photon Bolt. So I was playing, and it's an interesting project to make your physics like appear to work on both of client sides, and you can do it like with one ball, for example, if you're talking like about that Rocket League. All they need is like that one ball being simulated and synchronized across all the clients. But when you have like a brick wall that's broken, that's another thing, and it was so hard to do. So I kind of stopped doing that and like nope, I'm gonna do like single player from now, and then I'll return to multiplayer.
With physics in a lot of games, like imagine it's nothing important, like it's just a crate in the background and someone destroys it and it shatters. That's not going to be synced over the network because it's not worth it. But
Exactly.
in Rocket League,
because I was making a golf game where like it is everything like about like
Yeah.
about physics. Yeah.
well, it's just like with movement anyway. So there's like about client authoritative and server authoritative stuff. So like in a game, if the code for moving is on the server, the benefit is players can't cheat because they can't But the problem is then there's a delay from the person who's doing the moving, because if I press forwards, it tells the server, hey, I'm pressing forwards. The server's like, cool, I'll move you forwards. Then it gets back to you to actually move. There's always a delay. Whatever your like ping is your delay for movement, really. So what games do is you move on your screen, and then you tell the server that you want to move, and the server moves, and you send timestamps with all this. So what happens is the server then gets back to you afterwards, after it's moved you, and all it does is it checks, are you in the right place at the right time? If so, I'll let you just carry on what you're doing. So it's just to make it smooth for the player, because at the end of the day, 99% of your players won't be cheating, so there'll be no problem there. But you want to make sure people don't, because if people can do it, then you'll find more people will do it. It's the same with the physics thing, I'd say. Like, maybe I've never messed with like physics being the core thing of the game, right? Like Rocket League's ball or the golf ball. Maybe, if you do, you just have to sync positions. Like, I don't know how to make it smooth. Maybe reach out to the people who made Rocket League. I've played it quite a bit. I've seen it. If you've ever lagged,
they have a great talk on YouTube about how they made it. Yeah.
If you ever lag in the game, you notice how the ball is flying, then it kind of like stops and it just appears somewhere else. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting how they do that, because I doubt. Like, okay, I don't know. Is Rocket League in Unity? I think it's a different engine. Is it? I don't know, honestly. But let's imagine it was in Unity.
I can't remember. Yeah, let's imagine.
I don't know if they use a rigid body. They probably have their own physics for the ball, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because it seems more complex than just a rigid body. So we'll see.
I guess they have something custom and built around that, the ball, everything else.
Yeah, and it means that they can easily like sync across the network exactly what they want from their custom thing. Like with Mirror, it's as simple as you just add a sync var attribute to a variable, and whenever you change it on the server, it then gets updated on the clients. And if you try and change it on a client, it just doesn't work. Rocket League's made in Unreal. Someone says in my chat.
People are saying like made in Unreal.
That's the thing.
Okay, that's interesting.
So like people said, and still do for right now, say that Unity multiplayer is very hard. You need to use some third-party thing like Mirror or Photon. When I was trying Unreal, I was curious as to see, is it any easier to make multiplayer on Unreal? But I just couldn't find any good tutorials about it. I know there were like a few, but they seemed outdated or just weird. Or they also relied on third-party assets. I couldn't find, like, I understand every game's different, so it's going to be hard to find a multiplayer solution that works for all games. But you'd expect there to be at least something built in that works. When we were at the Unity event, I spoke with one of the Unity devs, saying like, so what would you recommend we do for multiplayer right now? And he said, don't. Like he just said don't. Like, or don't do multiplayer UNet. Yeah. Now the Mirror is built on top of UNet, but that's different.
But they're I'm sorry, but they're deprecating UNet, right? Because they have their new multiplayer system coming along.
But that's the thing. As far as I'm aware, that's for dots only. So, but that's not. I'm not promising anything there. It might work otherwise. Okay. Well, they're definitely making a dots multiplayer thing because they've even showed it off on the FPS sample.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's. Yeah. I'm not sure if that's the same thing they're using for like non-dot stuff. And it's the same with UI. So they're making the new UI framework, which apparently works in dots and non-dots. It's actually, I think you can go do it in the 2020 beta, like 2020.1 beta. The new UI thing where it's more like YAML or XAML, whatever people call it.
Nope.
Okay, it looks like you're designing a website, let's put it that way. You've got like tags for the different things, and then it's like that. And the reason they're doing that is because it allows you to so you can design the UI in code and like visually on the screen. So you can like drag and drop a button onto the screen, design it, and then when you realize, now I need to tweak like a tiny little bit, you can actually go into the code. There's maybe extra stuff you can do in the code that you can't in the visual thing. It's the same in shader graph, I think, right? Like, there are certain things you can't do in shader graph that you have to write code.
Yeah. You have to go and code. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's not really like a big deal, and that's the kind of stuff that they're obviously working on over time. I guess their main focus is what does like the average person want? What the features that everyone's going to use? And then there's the more like niche features that aren't used as often that they still need to get done for it to be like usable, right? Because if you're going to use shader graph, you should be able to use it for everything. I guess my problem with shaders, as someone who doesn't do shaders, is like if I see a shader and I look into the code or the shader graph, I understand it. I'm like, yeah, that all makes sense. That's how you get to that effect. But I can't start off with an idea of an effect and just make it in shader graph.
Yeah.
It's like I understand it when I see it.
Just a lot of iterations, like with everything else, like with code, because I believe right now, for like general purpose, like you said, like for the average Joe, shader graph can get you like 90% there. Like almost everything you need to do is already there. So I'm really liking shader graph for that. So I haven't had to touch any shader code since I started using shader graph. Not that I like can code shaders, but yeah.
Yeah, I actually looked a bit into the shader code stuff, but the main thing that confused me again was like versioning and like different types of shaders. Like I did a lot. Well, not a lot. I researched like theory behind shaders and the whole vertex, fragment, all the terminologies. So I have a basic understanding, but if anyone ever expects me to do shader stuff, then don't. When it first came out, I figured out like some cool little effects, but I don't know how you'd actually use them in games. And one cool thing I see a lot is like shaders that interact with your game world. So you have to like you have to have scripts, C# scripts that like change
scripts talking to shaders, talking to shaders.
It seems really cool if you get it working. I guess one question about shaders, I don't know if you know the answer, is I guess the combination of shaders. So I imagine you might have a weapon in your game and it's like a fire sword, like maybe the actual I mean, maybe this will be a particle effect, but let's imagine it's a shader for the sword to like make it look fiery. Then let's also imagine in your game, your items have like a yellow outline when you look at them, like to pick them up. That's usually done by shaders, right? I've seen people say, So how would you do it so that this fire sword has the yellow outline when you mouse over it? Because
I get a question. I don't know the answer, but I've also looked into it. Like you have to like somehow combine shaders, and I don't know if it could be done with shader graph. So don't know the answer to that question.
Because it's almost like
if anyone sees a shader guru, type in the comments.
Well, this is a kind of thing I actually asked Joyce. People might know her as Minions Art.
She's the shader guru.
And her answer, I think, if I remember correctly, was just that big companies use uber shaders, as in shaders that just do everything. That wasn't really like a satisfactory satisfactory answer. Because I was like, I was expecting a better solution than just a shader that does everything. Because I feel like if you have a shader that does everything, well, apparently, according to her, it's not that like bad for performance. It doesn't really make a difference if you have a shader that does a lot of things if you're not using those things. Like just because it's there, I guess it's like the same as saying, I could have a class that has like 100 functions. If I just never call any of them, it's not really a problem, is it? So obviously, don't do that. But the point is, with code, you can use like composition, right? You're like, oh, this thing needs health and damage. With shaders, you can't just be like, I want to stick 2 shaders. Because, I mean, you can have multiple materials on an object, but even then, it doesn't really work in the same way. Because I want an outline around my entire object, but only fire on the sword, like the actual metal part of the sword.
Shaders are also like one of those things people are really like fearful about. Like they say like, oh, I really want to learn shaders, but like I don't know where to start. They believe that it is some this like big hard thing to do, but once it's clicked, especially when you're doing shader graph, you go in, watch a couple of tutorials, and in time, like after you'll make a couple more shaders, something will click to you, and you'll just start seeing it all backwards, because like shader logic is a bit backwards. It's not like writing code. You have to go from the end to the beginning. So yeah, and once that thing is clicked, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. So if I want to make, for example, like a pattern, some pattern here, I just plug this, and it works. But yeah, when you don't know anything about shaders, it can seem super daunting, just like GameDev itself. But when you start, it's like, oh, why? It's easy. Yeah.
So a question I have is, these are my questions, right? I mean, people in my chat should also ask questions if they want. I've had a lot of people saying hello. The only question I've had is, what is the poster in my background? Oh, someone's saying, just add an extra material with the outline shader to the mesh renderer and remove it when you want to remove the outline. That sounds interesting. Because you can, on a mesh renderer,
just stack them.
Yeah, you have multiple materials.
Yeah.
So you effectively you add a material. I'm actually going to try that. Maybe not today, but shader graph and VFX.
But how do they stack? Yeah, that's interesting.
Well, yeah, because shaders.
So, I also wanted. Yeah.
No, I'm just trying to think out loud. Yeah, I'll mess around with that. Yeah. Maybe you should too. I don't know. Try and make some.
That's interesting, because that's something I also was thinking about. Like, how do you make like this interesting shader, but also like you said, and with an outline, or for example, or some like opacity or something.
Yeah. Well, I'm imagining if an item is interactable in your game, you would have like the interactable component, and then that would store the material and reference to a mesh renderer. So then, whenever it's hovered, you call a method on it. Like, I know it'll have an interact method for whatever happens when it interacts, but it would also have a method for like on hover, on end hover, I guess. And on hover, it would say, go to the mesh renderer and add this material to it. On end hover, go to the mesh renderer, remove this material. So I imagine that's like how it would work in C#. Not sure how you'd make the shader for that. Obviously, I'm not a shader person, but hey, I'd like to try it out.
Now I see the reasoning behind the Uber shaders. Yeah, it might be just easier to switch a boolean inside the shader from code and to add that. You know?
See, as someone who tries to like focus on like code design and separating everything out, that's why I'm not satisfied with that. But if that's how it is, then that's how it is. I had another question. Or do you want to ask a question? I've been asking many questions.
Let me just check the chat.
I'll hold my question a little bit longer.
So I want to talk. I don't know if you're like continuing the shader thing, or we can do some other topics. Because I want to talk about I don't know, about motivation, I guess, because you put out a lot of videos about motivation.
Motivation,
or lack of thereof, Well, because you put out a lot of videos, and it's for me, it's amazing to see a person do it so frequently and consistently. Like, maybe do you have any tips? Do you have any routine? How do you start your day? Like,
one tip is
any tips.
One tip is that 5 a week's too many. That's why doing a live stream helps, because I don't have to think of 5 videos a week, just 4 videos a week now. It's quite helpful because obviously for the stream, as long as I've got something to talk about, it's great. The thing with videos is you can't really recycle video ideas unless it's from like many years ago and they're really outdated. If I did a video last week and then I run out of ideas, I can't just redo that video this week. People be like, what? I've already seen that one, goodbye. I guess the motivation is that I know there's just so many things to cover, and I might get to the point where I've covered like most of the things I'm comfortable with, and that'll kind of encourage me to learn more stuff. I'm happy to do shader tutorials when I learn it, but right now I'm too busy doing all the other stuff to learn shaders. But I know, like, in my own game, if I get to that point where I'm like, I want this cool effect and I know I have to use a shader for it, so I'll try and do it myself, and if I can't, then I'll get in contact with people like Roman or Joyce, like, help me please, and then I just go ask on online forums, people help me make this effect. Because it's not my area, and I'm happy to help people the other way around, right? If people got questions about like code architecture and like, how would you go about making this system, doesn't mean it's the only way to do it, but I'm guessing it's the same with shaders, right? There's not one way to solve the problem. You ask about exactly. I think one problem right now, just in general with the quarantine, even though I basically stay at home anyway, is like sleep patterns. For some reason this doesn't affect my videos. Like I'm the kind of person that I can have no sleep, but the second I wake up I'm fully awake. Like I don't have that phase in the morning of like just moping around like, get me a coffee, I don't drink coffee, so I don't.
I have that. It comes with age,
I mean that was one of the things at the event, because I'm like the youngest person there. Everyone was saying like, you're so energetic, and I'm like, and they're like, don't worry, like not don't worry, but like, it'll run out eventually. You'll run out of energy at some point. But for now, that's not the case.
The guys are asking, who's the shader girl you're talking about? That's Joyce Minion's art. I'll just type it out. Check out her Twitter and Patreon. She does amazing stuff and tutorials.
She streams every Wednesday afternoon, I think, as well on Twitch.
Oh.
She has a YouTube channel but doesn't upload to it much. Her Twitter's definitely the place to look out, or Patreon. What's this? Mm-hmm. Someone saying.
It's about that output of yours. Have you had any weeks or maybe month when you haven't put out anything, like because you just didn't have like energy or again motivation?
Well,
burnout maybe.
I used to not actually have like a schedule. I just do a video when I had an idea. Had an idea, did a video, put it out. The thing is, my old videos were a lot less planned. Like I would just come up with an idea and just turn on the recording, and then the actual like raw footage would be up to an hour, maybe longer, for like a 20-minute video, because most of the time would be me messing around, like having problems. Now my kind of how I do a coding video is I just think of what I want to do, I go into my like project, make the example, and then I'm like, okay, this all works, cool. Then I save it on GitHub, and then I like revert so that my project is back how it was before I made those changes. Then I open up GitHub so I can see the changes I made, so I know what I have to like recode, I guess, and talk about. So I guess that helps for like, I don't spend too long recording because I have planned it out well enough. Obviously I spend time planning, so the time is always going to be somewhere, but
of course.
The motivation, and with burnout, I don't know. I don't have that problem right now.
Haven't experienced that?
No, I do have a problem sometimes with thinking of video ideas, but that doesn't mean I don't have video ideas. It's like I think of a certain idea I want to do, but I just don't want to do it right now, or like I realize that video idea I want to do it right, so I purposely don't want to do it right now. I want to give it more time. If it's like a bigger idea, if it's just something simple like yesterday, teaching about inheritance, I don't have to prepare that because it's such a common thing that I already know about. I'd still prepared so I had like a good example, and I made sure I delivered it correctly. But like regardless of, I can sometimes just wake up, think of my video idea, make the video, get it out. If it's something simple like that, if it's just a core thing about C#. The harder videos are where it's like, maybe progress on my thing or talking about.
You have to do research.
If it's something that requires research, but a lot of the time, at least for coding, so for yours, right? I remember your like road shader thing. I mean, did you already have have you already used that road shader somewhere else, or did you think I'm gonna make a road shader, or did people ask?
No, it was made I made it for my bridge level. I had a video where I was making a level for my golf game in Blender, and after I imported into Unity, I thought about, hey, let me make this road not like just geometry with colors, but like a proper shader. So I made the shader and I put it up on Twitter, and it kind of blew up, and I'm like, hey, people are really interested in seeing how is this made. So I had the original shader, and then I went and recorded a bunch of footage how I make it from beginning to the end, and then recorded over it my voice.
But that's the thing. So there's certain creators like you're one of them, where your content's more visually focused. in the sense that people look at your channel and they think, "Oh, look at all this cool stuff. I want to know how to make it." Whereas with my channel, I mean, I'm not a visual person. I mean, I am, but not in terms of I can't make good visuals. Sometimes I do by luck, like, you know, oh, I tweaked the right settings and now that looks cool. But most of the time, I focus more on the informative, just it's a programming tutorial. People know that when they come here. You know, this is just programming. Yeah, it's
Thank
important.
God for people like you, because I come from a graphic design background, so I'm not a programmer. So before Unity, I only coded in Flash using like their action script, the thing is, and even now in Unity, when I'm like 2-3 years coding in Unity, but only now have I started using delegates and generics and all that stuff. Like, you know, before that, all my code was like if-else statements, you know, 99%.
Well,
so yeah,
that's the thing.
It's really nice to see like more deeper in-depth C# thing, especially in the context of Unity, and that's why I love your videos. I love Code Monkey's videos. Yeah,
that's the thing. Like, so we teach C# things, right? Like interfaces, abstraction, inheritance. The problem is then people think like, okay, I've learned this new thing, I should use it everywhere, and it's like, no.
Yeah,
different things have different uses, and even then, from project to project, you might do it differently. If I make a inventory in one game, it's going to be completely different to an inventory in another game. So it's very hard to do a tutorial on how to make an inventory. I've done it in the past, and loads of people have. But the more I think about it, it's a bad idea, because people then try and use your inventory in their game and realize this isn't... Oh, there's police now. People think like, this isn't what I want, or it just... I then get questions like, oh, cool, how do I do this in my game? And it's like, I'd love to help, but then I need more information, I need to know your project, I need to dedicate my time to like seeing what you need, you know? That's why now my content, at least for the time being, is more... I'm not trying to teach people and sell a lie like, this is how you make an inventory. It's more, this is what inheritance is, and these are some uses of it. Like, I don't want to, you know, give people...
One way in 1,000 how to
exactly, make. And there's certain things that I've learned in the past, and I've used it in like what I consider the wrong places. It still worked, but it's just caused me more pain than... So for example, I saw one thing, my question earlier that I was going to ask, you posted something on Twitter, or you liked something or retweeted, I don't know, and it was some guy who had a door, and it had like 10 interfaces on it or something. Like,
oh yeah.
And I was looking at that and I was crying, because I'm like, okay, the problem... So interfaces are great in certain places. The problem is, I would never in my game pretty much make a door script, because I consider that too specific. The thing is, what is a door? Well, you've defined a door by all these interfaces. It's interactable, it's this, it's that, it's the other. So rather than making an interface for something that's interactable and then having all the different like interactable objects, why not just have an interactable component? It's just called interactable maybe. And all it does is it has the function for interact, and then maybe it raises a Unity event on interact. So now you're at the point where you can interact with this object. You don't have to write custom scripts for the logic, for a door, for whatever else you can interact with. You just like have the Unity event now ready to go. You can plug in whatever logic you want from that. And I understand Unity events.
This like inheritance versus composition, right?
Exactly, yeah. But that's the thing. People think interfaces is composition, and a lot of the time it is, but it's like one step closer towards what you should be doing, in my opinion. Now, I'm always going to say my opinion, because people will say Unity events are bad for performance. Honestly, I've never checked the difference between normal C# events, Unity events, and this alt events thing I've started using, which are really useful. I assume usually the more something does, the heavier it is, the more performant hitting it is. But if it's an event that's only raised, for example, on interact with a door, how often do you interact with a door in your game? It's so infrequent that I don't care that like I can save so much code. This door script, right? All that logic for all these interfaces. The problem is, you might have another interactable object in your game that uses pretty much all the same interfaces and has pretty much the same logic, maybe one line's different. I'd say you're just now rewriting loads of code. When you have problems interacting with an object, you now don't know, is the problem with the interaction system or is it with the object? At least with this approach with just one interactable script sitting on anything that's interactable, and then raising a Unity event to say like what to do when you interact with this thing. because then it allows you to in Unity now just make a new game object. It's interactable. Let's chuck on the interactable script, and now I can do whatever I want. You know, I've got a Unity event. Just trigger something. It's so much faster for the design. And yeah, the only downside I ever see people say is performance, but I've never seen anyone do a performance comparison. I'm gonna do one. I'm gonna do one this week probably. Like on Thursday. Maybe that's tomorrow's video.
If we're still talking about Unity events and C# events, when I was working on the explosion itself in the Bomber game, I've tried using Unity events, and then I went to do C# events, and they were faster. There is that.
So the thing is, like, what we're using the event for, because your bomb game looks like demanding for performance, definitely, because it's lots of things happening.
I've done in fact I've done a bunch of things to optimize that. So how is that explosion is made? It's made out of like these little fireballs, you know, and each fireball can move through geometry. It has shader, and it has some logic, like it has to die out in some time. So one thing that really helped me was not using update methods on each of the fireballs, but just putting them all into like one manager with a list, and that list has one update and just goes through the list with a for loop and updates all those fireballs. So that was like 10 times faster than before. I don't know why, but if you just leave like if you have like 1,000 objects and they all have scripts with an empty update method, it takes out of performance.
It's because when you compile, Unity is smart enough to know that if you don't use one of the callbacks, same with start on enable and disable, if you don't use it, it just doesn't call it. It's weird. So when you have methods
but if it's just empty, it still uses it.
That's just because it's like, well, it's defined, so I'm gonna call it. And obviously the problem, the slowness isn't because it's got any logic in the update to call. It's more of the fact that it's got a call update on all these different objects. It's got to jump around memory to all these thousands of different explosion things and do whatever it needs to do on them all. At least if you've got a list of them, okay, so the list solution requires more memory because you're storing a list of hundreds of different things, but a little bit more memory at the to save that much performance is definitely worth it. Now that's where you'd use ECS if it was maybe more like developed and more comfortable with it, right? Because with ECS you would just have a system looping over all these things, and it would just do it for you.
I should really try that.
Like, don't just scrap your project and start in ECS. No. Make a prototype in ECS as a separate project. Because I don't know how you would, for example, from ECS then interact with your shader, for example.
And plus like you have to do all the physics on the new physics, like that's physics. I don't know how it's called. Like you have to
it's just
move
called
everything
Unity physics. Well, that's the thing. There's equivalents. If you don't want a rigid body, you stick on the new physics body, it's called, or something. It's not that hard to like grasp, and
and it just works.
And that's the thing. You know, at the event they showed us the component authoring. So like you have the convert to entity component. You put it on something, and when it spawns, it gets converted to an entity. With that, what you'd want is instead of convert and destroy. So what convert and destroy is, quite simply, it destroys the object and makes an ECS representation. But that's if you want that object to be like pure ECS. But because you need like to interact with your shader, maybe you'd want the other option, which is like convert and inject. And what the inject thing does is it makes an ECS representation of the object, but it doesn't destroy the game object version. So you can have still a little bit of logic on there for what you need. Now, eventually, everything should be pure ECS and it'll work. I remember them saying the example they used was they need a camera in their game to follow the player. Do you remember? Was it his name's Ciro? Ciro. You know, the who showed us the little example. It was like a mobile. It kind of looked like a mobile game. The character moved around and killed some people, some archers. I can't remember. He had it so the camera follows the player. But in ECS, there is no player. I mean, you can have a player tag, but the cameras in Unity are not currently in ECS. Cameras are still normal mono-behavior component stuff. So it can only follow like a game object. So he needed to have an ECS representation of his player with some of the logic still kept back in the game object world. It was the same with the animator, because the version he was using wasn't using the new animation thing they're developing. So he still needed to use the mono behavior animator component. So his player was like half ECS, half not. So maybe you could actually find some like help there, where your game is still pretty much all game objects and components, but the bomb explosion bit, specifically the high performance, is ECS. I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. Another thing that really helped boost performance, of course, shaders. When I was updating transform positions and everything on the update loop, it was like killing my performance. But when you move that all to shaders, so the object itself is not moving, but it's like shader representation. Like, so it's all done in shader. It boosts performance like tenfold.
Because obviously shaders.
I also have a question for you here in my live chat. Tulan asks a little question for Dino. If I want to make a multiplayer game, so do I need to finish a game, the single player one, and then add multiplayer, or do it from the start? So,
I've got two answers to this. So if you're on about developing a multiplayer game, like you want to make a multiplayer game, depending on what it is, if it can be made in single player, I would say make it in single player first to create all the mechanics of your game. Because when you make mechanics in multiplayer, it's kind of different. I've noticed that, for example, single player games are easier because you don't worry about multiplayer stuff. Whenever you make something in multiplayer, you've got to think, all right, what goes wrong? What happens if someone disconnects? What happens if someone cheats? What happens, if there's lag? You've got to worry about all these things. On a single player game, you don't worry, because if you lag, you're the one lagging. You don't have to worry about how does this affect everyone else on the server, all this. I guess my answer is probably make it in single player first. But one thing I want to know that I actually don't know is there's lots of games that have single player and multiplayer, and I can't imagine them having two code bases for both types, because so let's say I have a mono behavior in my multiplayer game. It's actually inheriting from network behavior instead, which is mirrors networked mono behavior, basically. So it's a class they inherit from mono behavior that has some network stuff, then you inherit from that. So where you would normally use mono, you use that. And I'm thinking, well, that object only even works, and it gives you errors if you use it when you're connected to a server. So I'm now thinking, well, what if I want to reuse that logic in a single player environment? I can't, maybe, or I have to recode it, or maybe that is a case of interfaces. Maybe for every mono behavior for a certain thing, you have the online and offline version. I honestly don't know. Because the game I'm making doesn't have a single player mode, it's just multiplayer. So I'm not thinking about that. So I don't have a good answer, I guess. Just maybe even if you're making it in Mirror, go to their Discord server and ask them what they recommend for games that have single and multiplayer. Because it's interesting. I'm thinking Minecraft, for example, right? You play single player, you're just running it on your machine. You're not hosting a server and it's nothing like that. It's completely local. Whereas you don't need internet connection to do it. Whereas as soon as you make a multiplayer thing, you have to go download a server, run it, connect to the server. But the game's the exact same, and I can't imagine them having two code bases for non-multiplayer, even though everything's the same. I don't know, honestly. I want to know. That is something. I think I saw someone talk about it in the Mirror server yesterday, and I might go back and check actually at some point what they were talking about, because I'm sure someone's helped them out and pointed them in the right direction.
But I also think if you're planning on doing multiplayer, you better think about it from the very beginning. If you are going to completely finish the game single player and then try to add multiplayer to it, it'll be just twice more work, I guess.
That is true. Yeah, if you know from the start that you want it to be multiplayer, then definitely start making it multiplayer, because everything's different. If you're thinking even the menus, just the main menus. Normally, when you press play, just load the first scene. When you're in a multiplayer game, all right, connect to the server, then have maybe a lobby and a start game thing. You might have to ready up. Maybe you have to go in queue and be matched against other players. It's completely different, and that's another thing about Unity events. So if you have the logic that's going to stay the same no matter what, that's the thing. How I think of Unity events and when to use them and when not to use them. If your logic for something is the same all the time, then code it, because it's the same all the time, you know? You change it, you change it. If it's something that's like completely dynamic and you want full control over, like, you know, oh, I want to tweak this, or I want to quickly add that, or I'm imagining in your game you might have consumables. So a thing a lot of people would do is they make a consumable class, maybe inherits from item, right? And on consume, it would do something. I don't see a good way of coding that, because what if you have a health potion, a speed potion, this, that, the other? Maybe potions can do literally anything in your game, right? That's the thing. You don't want to limit yourself once you're coding. You don't want to be tied down by your own code. You want to be like, you know, I've written good code that I can make whatever I want in my game. I want to just decide today, I'm going to make a potion that speeds up the player. Yeah, I should be able to just create a new game object or scriptable object or whatever you're doing for your potion, and then just like build it up by dragging things on, plugging things in, designing it, and you're done. You don't want to think, all right, now I have to make the health potion class or the speed potion class, because then I can come along and be like, hey, like imagine I'm like your boss and you're coding it, right? And then I'm like, all right, I want a potion that heals the player and increases their speed. You're like, wait, what? It's like, I've got a health potion, I've got a speed potion. How do I make a potion that does both? Yeah. Now they have to redesign it and be like, I need a list of effects. So now it does heal and speed, there's the 2 effects. And it's like, well, what about if I want this potion to teleport me somewhere?
Yeah, next day he comes like, yeah, let's do it like another way. But then like, yeah, let's bag it up. But then like change it again. So,
exactly. You don't want to have this in, because the problem with inheritance trees is that it's like, you've got item, goes down to potion, maybe down to health potion, down to speed potion. So you got these 2 potions. But what if you want something mixed from both? Well, now you've got to make the health speed potion or the speed health potion. It's like, and then you want to add something else in there, and it's like, no, that's not what you want to do. I've done it, and it's bad. That's why I just want something simple where it's like, all right, I code the logic for healing. Like, so what I've started doing now is I've made mono behaviors, and I've called them like actions, I guess. So I've got like the heal action and the deal damage action. And this mono behavior, I just stick it on something. So, for example, my potion is a game object, and I stick on the heal thing. And all this component does is it's got no state. So obviously by that I mean it doesn't store any data specific to the thing it's doing. Every bit of data it uses is passed in as a parameter. So this component is stateless in the sense that if I call it once and then this game object stays around and I call it again, there's no like lingering data from the last time I used it. It's always ready. It's like functional programming. I'm not going to get into that, but the point is there's no state. It's all about like you define logic and you take stuff in. It's the way of thinking that if you pass the same thing in twice, you get the same thing out twice. Like, there's no state in there. So the benefit is on this potion now, all I need is a way for it to know like who is the target, who am I healing. So as long as I can pass in the player's game object reference, then I can just say, all right, go get the health component and heal it. And then if I decide, you know, now I want to actually deal damage to the player, maybe it's a poison potion and he shouldn't have drunk it. Well, then I stick the deal damage one and I drag that in, and then now the potion damages the player. I'm like, all I coded was the logic for dealing damage and healing. And that's the good thing about that. If I ever changed, let's imagine at the start of my game, damage is just dealing an integer, like 10 damage. Then later on I decide, you know what, maybe I'm going to add damage types, like poison, fire, water. Well, if you had code for dealing damage all over your project, then you've got to go through all of it and start adding in that like extra parameter. If you do it like this, the only place damage is ever dealt is in the deal damage action. So you can now change how damage is dealt in one place, and it works everywhere. This is what I've started doing. And okay, every time you find something good in programming, there's always a downside. You've always got to think, oh, really? Like with Unity events, oh, the performance, I'm still going to check how bad that is. But that's the thing. Unless you're doing it in the update loop, it's fine.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Health potion, you might use it every couple of minutes when you need to heal. That's not going to impact performance. You know, Unity events wouldn't exist if they were that bad to the point where you just aren't meant to use them. They have uses. They're uses. Of course. I mean, I remember in Charles's video, he called them serialized function calls, and that's really what it is.
Yes, yeah.
Because the problem with function calls normally is you've got to hard code them, and every time you come up with some custom logic, you've now got to add a new function, a new class to tie it all together. Now you have this huge code base of tying everything in. When you want to make a change to your games, like you want to add some more content, you've got to change your code. The point is you shouldn't have to change code to make new content. You should have to change code to make new mechanics, for example. You make your mechanic and then you can use it is the point. You want it to be usable everywhere. Someone's saying, actually, I've not checked the chat for questions. Maybe we should do a bit of that now. I guess I can start because I've got a few.
Yeah.
What do I think of the new? Well, what do we think of the new Unity input system? Have I worked with it yet? I use it in all my projects now. I don't know about you.
Yes, and in fact, I watched your tutorial on
which one? I've actually
how to
covered
set
it.
it up. Yeah.
Well, like the old one where it's got like a picture of some game controllers in the thumbnail, maybe.
I can't remember, but I
okay.
started using it. I guess like in November, December, maybe something like that.
Okay.
So
you should have reached out to me then.
Answer the question.
No, that's what you said. You
no.
There you go.
Yeah. I said I tried reaching out to you, but I couldn't. And then we met in real life in a couple of months after that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's because the email on my YouTube page or Twitter or something was wrong. I didn't know, and because I didn't know, I never fixed it until I think it was Elena told me like, hey, I tried contacting you through this, and then I was like, oh wait, it's the wrong email or it's the wrong this, and I'm like, sorry. I probably missed lots of people trying to get in touch. And then we got in touch anyway, so whatever. But yeah, the Unity input system.
But no, the new input system is amazing. Before that, I haven't ever used the Unity's input system, old one. I used Rewired.
Oh, I've heard about that. Yeah. I never used it, but I've heard about it. I've heard
so. Yeah. So the new input system is kind of like similar in a way. For me, I love using when it's all built in, I don't want to rely on a bunch of third-party stuff. So whenever, like before Shader Graph, I used Amplify Shader or whatever there was. Like before the new Unity input system, I used Rewired. And even though maybe Shader Graph is not as feature complete as Amplify Shader, or maybe new input system is not as feature complete as Rewired, still, because it's all already built into Unity and it's maintained by the same team, I'm sticking to that.
Yeah. The only problem I've ever had, which is nothing wrong with the input system, it's just input in general is like, okay, imagine at some point in your game spacebar is jump, but maybe you get in a vehicle and spacebar is now something else, like it's boost, like nitro boost in a car.
Yeah.
How do you go about
you change those mappings, if I remember correctly, because it was more it was more systematically explained in the Rewired. Yeah, he had the examples, for example, you're walking or you're in the menu, or you're jumping into a car. Yeah, and what he proposed doing is changing map types. I can't remember how it was called, and I guess Unity input system also doing that.
Well,
right?
My problem with it is, so with the Unity input system, in your different classes where you use input, you make a new instance of it. You remember, you make a new controls or whatever, and then you subscribe to the events action. So it's controls.player.moved or something. And that gives you this callback context, and then you read a vector2 from it or whatever. The problem is, you can change the map. You can enable and disable maps, like action maps, but you can't do it globally. So every single script that has input has its own instance of it. I feel like there's no built-in way to handle it. You have to make your own solution now. The thing I was thinking of is maybe I was thinking about it wrong the entire way. I'm imagining a game. You've got a hotbar. You press a key. It does something. We'll go again with the health potion example, right? You press the key. It drinks the health potion. Let's imagine you can't drink the health potion because you're jumping, right? Maybe you've got to be grounded on the floor to use a health potion. Channeling stuff maybe has to be done on the ground. Well, the thing is, you don't want to stop or change the map because you're not on the ground. Because in those games, usually when you can't do something but you try and do it, and there might be a sound effect, right? Say indicating you can't do this right now. There's usually a sound effect if you try and use an ability and it's on cooldown or something. So at the end of the day, that made me think, well, that means this function is being called by the input system callback is still calling this function even though it can't be done because I'm airborne. So maybe input should always be accepted everywhere, regardless of state, but then you have code to check can I even do this right now? So I'm still trying to think in a game that's quite complex, how does something know that it can be done? So you have a spell, this spell can only be used when grounded, but let's say you have another spell that can only be used when you're airborne, Like maybe you have to be off the ground. Well, that's when I've started thinking like, okay, so different things have different requirements to be done, right? Like spells have different requirements to be cast, and maybe items have different requirements to be used, and whatever it might be, right?
Okay.
So maybe maybe you make a requirement class. Now this is where an interface would be useful, or maybe a base class. Regardless, it's the same thing. And a requirement just has a bool to say whether it's met or not, right? Is this requirement met? And then you would have loads of different like things using this interface, like different kinds of conditions. So you'd have the level condition, and the level condition would be like, go get the player's level, and is it like high enough, low enough? This component would handle you. I'm just rambling now, obviously. How do I explain what I'm trying to say? Okay, in a game, you don't want to have the code where it's like we said earlier, right? You have the inheritance tree of potion, this potion, that potion.
Yeah.
You don't want like down in the health potion to have some code saying, well, if the players on full health don't heal, because then what if you have a different potion that's also a health potion, but maybe you can use it when you're on full health? You don't want some like bool saying actually this overrides that and I can use it. I find inheritance just becomes a mess, basically, all the time. It always becomes a mess.
Mm-hmm.
Composition is always going to be better. I'm trying to think now. Is there any case where that's not true? Where inheritance isn't better? Where composition isn't better? I don't think there is. Anytime someone said, you know, I'm just rambling on about that condition thing.
I don't know. In smaller things, like for example, I was making like my own like twin system or something like that.
What system?
And yeah, you had like twinner system,
tween.
Like so you can make twins, delays, animations, I don't know. So yeah, so you have a base class, you inherit from it, and then because like you can be animating like a vector 3, or you can be animating a float. So you store that all in their own separate class that inherit from the base class, and you have that base class, a list of those base classes. So then you can like iterate through them. So that's like when I use, for example, inheritance, like in these small tiny cases. But like you said, in most of the other ones, I think composition is
it's when like with game logic, when you're the designer, you want to have composition, because you want to make a game object and just drag everything on that it does. Yet you have more components than you would if you weren't doing composition. But the object will have more components on it, but your project will have less components in general, because you won't have like the player health. I used to have something where it's like I had the player health component and the enemy health component, and they both basically do the same logic, like for managing health, except the players had some logic for what happens when the player dies as opposed to what happens when the enemy dies. And I don't know about what's your view on singletons? Do you know about singletons?
I use them, but I keep hearing people say like singletons are bad stuff. Like
have you heard why they're bad?
Singletons, your code is wrong. Like,
have you heard why they're bad? Because I used to use them everywhere, and then it really can bite you like back. Because the problem with singletons is, even if you're completely sure that this is only ever going to be like one instance of this thing, if there's ever an actual good use for a singleton, it's usually better to be done as a scriptable object, because the thing about singletons is you can't guarantee they'll always be there in the scene. Then you might write some logic like, if I'm trying to access a singleton and it's null, then go to the resources folder and spawn it in. But even then, like that's what like people call a code smell. It's like, this isn't what you should be doing. It just is a bit of a mess. So I mean, give me an example where you use a singleton, and I'll try and convince you that like there's a better way, if I can. Maybe I can't, but
no, just for example, like I have like a game manager, script, and I load another scene, like, and maybe there's another game manager. I don't have two game managers.
Yeah, I used to have game managers. The problem with game managers is it's like you've got global state of your game. That's the problem with. Okay, what do you use in your game manager? You say for like changing scenes, for example.
Oh yeah, for example, yeah.
Well, so like you've completed your level, go to the next scene or the next level. See, in my opinion, I wouldn't have like a game manager. I would just have a component that handles that logic, right? Everything would be spread out. So let's say for example in your game, do you go to the next level by like destroying all the I don't even know what you call them in your thing. Like you get the bomb to a certain place, right? Or you get to a certain place by blowing the path up to get there.
Yeah.
It's like that, yeah. So when you touch the door or the teleporter or whatever, what happens? Like what happens? Does it call a singleton?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, call single of new level. Yeah, exactly.
Because all right, so does the singleton store like a list of all the levels you need to go to? Are the levels like level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, or like?
I just be okay. Yeah.
Because
right now I just like go to the next level, but ideally it'll be just like yeah.
Well, so the component to go to the next level could be on the thing you have to interact with, like the thing you run into. Because it could, if the level naming is like level 2, level 3, what that component can do is it can say, okay, what is the scene called that we're in right now? Okay, add 1 to the end of the thing. Like you can like go to the string and add 1. That's one way of doing it. But also, you can have an event raised when you complete the level, like from the thing you interact with, right? It raises an event, not a Unity event, because it could. The problem with Unity events in this case is because they're serialized function calls, any references need to be there at compile time. Like, obviously, you can't with a Unity event. Well, actually, no, sorry, that's technically not true because you can in code subscribe to Unity events. Like, you can add a listener and remove listeners to Unity events, but you only use a Unity event if you want to use it as a Unity event. If you just need a C# event, then you use that because it's more lightweighted. Yeah. But I just imagine you have a script in your scene that handles going to the next level when it's done. Because the game manager then maybe, does that exist on the menu as well? Like at the start of the game? Because now you've got this thing that is in like every scene all the time. And then obviously, if the game manager isn't there, then it has problems. Maybe it spawns it in, and that's just like, okay.
But that's also like how the game progresses. You know, you start with something really small, so you like have your like main script that handles everything. Then you figure out like, okay, let's separate logic. One goes there, one goes there, and as your project grows bigger, you try to like separate the logic from the main script. And maybe in the end that game manager would be completely empty, you know, because like all the logic will be out of it.
I used to do the same thing with this, and that's another thing. So I don't like using don't destroy unload because it means that you have to remember to destroy the thing manually at the right time, otherwise it's not where it's meant to be. Like imagine your game only has score. Let's imagine it's a game with score, and that score is added up from each level to level, right? So like if you get 10 points in the first level and go to the next one, you still got 10 points to start off with. Well, the way I used to do that is I would make something don't destroy unload so it just persists across all the levels. But then
that's what I do.
But then then you have to remember, well, when I go back to the main menu or when I win the game or whatever, to like destroy that game object, so because it's done. We don't want score to exist now that we're done. The way I would do it now is kind of similar, but I think it's better. Is maybe with the additive scene stuff. So you would have an additive scene with like certain things for your gameplay in it. So like the score handler, right? So this thing isn't don't destroy and load. It's just in a separate scene. And then what that means is that like when you start your game, you load that scene additively with your like actual gameplay scene. And then when you go to the next scene, obviously you're changing your gameplay scene to the next level, but your score manager and whatever, that like exists across the scene. And then you just unload that scene when you're done with it. And I guess the benefit is that you don't need to now have like so if you, let's say you want to now go and start on level 5, you can like additively, how am I trying to explain this? I guess additive scenes is just better than using don't destroy and load. When you call load scene in Unity, you can pass in an enum for like, do I want to load it additively or this is the problem with talking about coding stuff and not having a project open to like back up what I'm saying, because I'm like, is this how it is? I think it is. It's been a little while. But yeah, like imagine you're in a game and you want to save your inventory between like one room and the next room. You could do it in many ways, but I feel like the best way, if you have like a loading screen, is just to save the data to a file, go to the next level, and load it from the file.
Yeah.
Because then you don't have to worry about
that's
keeping stuff across scenes. Each scene is still independent. It's I think it's the better way.
I guess this is what I'll end up doing. Yeah, exactly.
Like if it's something simple, just like score, then maybe use player prefs.
No, I haven't. I used the how that asset called? Save something. The most popular asset for saving.
Whenever I've saved, I usually write my own. So, but I'll see if there's a good.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I'm using assets. Yeah. Sorry. There's guys are getting pissed. We don't focus on the chat. So there are a bunch of questions.
Okay, let's look at chat.
Yeah, Alexis. I had objects with names that indicate nebulosity, what they do. You might as well call them doer objects. Yeah, which might as well be functions.
Do I think scriptable object events? Oh, go on. You go yours.
I'm reading the. How was that book called? Oh my god. Clean Code, yes. I'm reading now the Clean Code book, and that's exactly like in the first chapter what the guys he's saying, like about properly naming your methods and variables and fields. That's something we like tend to not think about, but literally when your project grows to a much bigger state, you have to consciously name things like normally, because if you like come back to your project like in 2 months and you see like and you can't understand just by reading your code what this is doing, you've made something like wrong. You might harder it for yourself by naming things like nebulously.
I feel like I'm actually the opposite here. I'm very picky. Like, so when writing code, I make sure things are like named well, and I'll spend more time just sitting there naming things correctly. Like just to make sure. Well, it's a good thing in the long run. You might think I'm wasting some time now, but it is good when you come back later. If you have like an integer somewhere, don't call it x. You know, what is x? You want to call it what it is. I see a lot of people now. I think unless unless x is the right thing to call it, because maybe it's like a vector, right, and it's the x value. But even then, you know, naming things is important, and there's not really any downside to it. One thing I get annoyed about is like, oh, maybe I have a function, but it's like the same name as the class, or like, oh, the class is the same as the namespace. You have to make sure you don't do that correctly. But apart from that, it's fine. Yeah.
Was it your question on your side?
Someone said, do you think scriptable object events are a good idea when you have to handle many different events with different parameters? So do you know what scriptable object events are? Have you seen Ryan Hippel's talk?
I've used them only once. Like I tried what they is, but I haven't used them, so I don't know all the uses for them. Yeah.
So I used it for a bit and then stopped because I thought they were good, and I still see some use in them, but not worth it. So how the scriptable object events work is you like the scriptable object is the thing that ties everything together. So in code somewhere, you have reference to that scriptable object. So let's say this event has no data being passed through it. It's just like a void event in the sense that there's no data. It's just triggering an event. Well, you'd have maybe, let's call it a void event. So in your script where you raise the event, you'd have a serialized field private. You'd drag in the scriptable object called like void event. Well, it wouldn't be called void event. It would be called like on something, right? And you'd say on whatever dot invoke. So you raise the event, and then this scriptable object has a list of subscribers, and then on your other game objects where you want to listen for this event, you have a component called like the void event listener, and that on enable, on disable will add and remove itself from that scriptable object's list. So effectively, whenever you raise the event through the scriptable object, it goes over its list of listeners and then triggers them all to do their thing. It works, and I guess the main problem with it is now that like all your event listeners are like, I like having things on game objects to design in the interface, like with Unity events. The problem is when you overdo it, it becomes really hard to see what's going on. When you have like 20 components on an object, And there's no like folder system to like group them together. It's just a big list. I often have to like compact them down to be able to see what I've got. I'd say, yeah, you can make good use of scriptable object events based on how simple your game is or how complex, but I'd advise going about it differently than using scriptable object events in the long term, because you'll probably just get overwhelmed with, if you use them too much, like the inspector will be really hard to see, like, oh, I've got 10 event listeners on this object and all this being dragged in everywhere, and it's a mess. Yeah. Do you want to go for one of your questions?
Yeah, people say like, yeah, I get annoyed when a variable's too long and it makes them harder to type. Well, you don't have to type them all because like auto completion and everything. But yeah, I sometimes have like super long variables. But like, yeah, they explain what they do.
Give me an example of a variable, because I also used to have like really long variables, and not all the time, but most of the time, you can like just think of a better name.
Maybe it's just a matter of like tweakly, but sometimes I have like a couple of variables or a couple of methods that are doing like something really similar, and you have to like tell yourself like, no, this does like exactly that, like, and this does the opposite, you know? Like, yeah, there are some edge cases.
Yeah, the thing with like long variable names, it usually indicates that the thing that the variable's about is doing too much. If it's got such a long name, it's like something like very, very specific, or it's doing too much. That's not always the case, but it can often be like a sign of wait, was Discord lagged? No. Hello?
I'm like you're a bit,
oh, yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I'm hearing.
Okay, yeah. I forgot what I was saying now. Yeah, long variable names can usually mean that something's like doing too much, because most of the time variable names are like 1 or 2 words long. I'm trying to think of examples where they're like even longer than that. Like the longest variable names I commonly use, like referencing the character controller and just calling it character controller. Sometimes I just abbreviate it down to controller. If it's the only kind of controller, that's the thing. Yeah, if it's got a long variable name, but it's the only thing like itself in that class, then I think it's okay to cut down the name, because like I said with character controller, if there's no other controllers, just call it controller. Yeah. It's the only controller, so there's no confusion. As soon as you add something else that also is a controller, then you don't know which is which, so call them obviously different things. Yeah, I guess naming is just something you pick up over time, and then you don't think about it because you just do it naturally. It's not something you really think about that often. Was that your question or mine we just did? I think we did mine about the scriptable object events. So
yeah,
have you got another?
People are still arguing about naming things, and my gravity force vector for the entity, but variable name. Yeah.
Is that the variable name, the entire thing you just said?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so I guess we also should be like wrapping up by a little, because we're doing it for more than an hour now.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we started a bit later. At
least have any? Yeah,
I think just quickly finish off some final questions. Like we can go for a few more questions.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
All right. I have a game with multiple levels. How do I transfer all my UI game objects that I have in level 1 scene to level 2 scene? So there's 2 solutions to that, in my opinion. You either have an additive scene or with the UI in that scene, or you, in your different scenes, have a prefab for the UI. So you just drop that prefab in each scene. And then if you ever modify your UI, it's in all your scenes. Those are the 2 options. I usually go for the prefab one because it's easier to set up. But maybe in a big project, it's better to use additive scenes. I've heard people use additive scenes for their UI, like they have it separated. I personally just put it in prefabs. I find that easier, but yeah. Because prefabs are really good nowadays. They didn't used to be. Before nested prefabs and everything, prefabs were a pain to work with. But now they're really, really good to work with. You need to make use of prefabs to make your project easier.
Yeah, I still haven't figured it out, like, to work with them, with the new ones.
Well, so you should, because they're so useful.
Yeah. Exactly. People were asking about when's the new Unity multiplayer system going to be released. No ETA on that.
No. I wish they would have told us, but they didn't. And because I think it's to do with dots, then I guess as dots comes out, that'll come out. But that's the thing I'm not worried about. Like, what about everyone who doesn't want to do dots but wants to make multiplayer? Are they going to have to go for third-party stuff still? Or because they haven't confirmed a non-dots multiplayer thing coming, but maybe there is. Maybe I've missed that.
But they also released like a year ago. I can't remember this like FPS project, which looked like an Avatar movie.
I know what you mean.
That's when they debuted, I guess, that new multiplayer system, and it wasn't dots.
No, but is that actually the thing that they're working on? I thought that. I never actually used that.
I thought, I thought that was like the beginning of their new multiplayer system, but I haven't heard anything still.
I don't know either now.
Or I haven't checked. Yeah, so we're gonna check on that.
Just reading through some more.
Yeah.
See, some of the things aren't questions; they're just people talking.
Yeah, of course. He also liked like one person when we were talking about Unity versus Unreal, and it can be said about a lot of things, but at the end of the day, they're only tools, and like how you use them,
it's up to you. Yeah, I don't have a problem. I don't try and convert people from using Unreal Engine to Unity. I don't say things like, "Hey," because the chances are they've used Unity. They're not, but anyone who's used Unity has probably used Unreal to test it. Same the other way around. If you've used Unreal, you've probably used Unity, at least had a go of it. So if you realize it's not for you, then that's fine, right? What do you think is the best way to check for grounded? I use 2 ray/sphere casts attached to a character's feet. Well, I personally just use the built-in character controller grounded method. I've had a method like Boolean. I've had some problems with it, as a lot of people have, where it doesn't sometimes detect that you're grounded. But I found the workaround for that. Basically, with character controllers, you write your own gravity. You don't use a rigid body and a character controller together. You just have a character controller, and do you use character controller to move, or?
No, I use a physics object. Yeah,
it's physics. Yeah,
like the rigid body.
The reason I use character controller is it's just more control over everything. I use like rigid bodies for other things in the game, like things in the scene that have physics. But for players and enemies and stuff, I think the character controller, it's what I use. And I like
I just started out that way and haven't checked out the character controller. Yeah, like, so maybe there
some people get confused and they think that it's like a pre-built character controller, and like if you want to make your own custom movement kind of thing, you have to not use it. But no, it's actually just literally a capsule collider with some settings, and then it has like a move function, and it's up to you to write your own script which calls that move function. So you can make whatever movement you want. The main thing it does for you is it handles like slopes and collisions. If you've ever noticed, if you run into a wall with like a normal so obviously you're using physics, so it's different because the physics engine stops you glitching into the wall. But a lot of people, instead of character controllers, use movement by transform, like they use transform.translate. The problem is, what it does is it pushes you into an object, and then it realizes, wait, I shouldn't be here, and because a collision pushes you out. So if you try walking into a wall, you glitch on it, you start like, you might have seen it before, right? Thing with character controller is, when you call move, I don't know how it works internally, but the point is, it makes sure you don't do that. You like move up to the wall and you don't glitch into it. So it's good for handling annoying little things for you. You have to make your own gravity, but gravity is quite simple in the sense that
of course.
you just store your Y velocity, and while you're not grounded, you increase it downwards. So obviously you fall faster and faster because of acceleration, and it allows you to then decide yourself, do I want terminal velocity to be a thing? If people know about physics, it's like, if you do, then code it. If you don't, then don't code it. The thing about rigid bodies is you're kind of fixed on the rigid bodies. If you
but you can turn off the gravity if you're talking about gravity, and then code your own the checkbox.
Obviously rigid bodies are useful for certain things, and I've seen plenty of things about use rigid body or character controller. I guess if rigid body is enough for what you need, then sure, but as soon as you need anything more complex, then it might be quite hard to do just with a rigid body. I mean, how do you do grounded detection? Do you do raycasts?
Raycast,
yeah. I think so, like one raycast down from the middle of the player.
Right now, Yes.
Because there's a problem when like you're on a
yeah,
ledge.
oh yeah. No, I'm doing Spherecast, so it'd be a bit a bit larger area, surface area.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure, but that might be how they do it in the character controller. They just have a boolean, so you just check if you're grounded or not, and it works just fine. There are problems with because you have to control gravity yourself. You have to make sure that even when you're on the ground, you're still applying a slight downwards force, because otherwise what happens is your character seems like they're grounded, but they're actually like slightly hovering above the ground, so you're not grounded. And then, for example, you can't jump now because the boolean's saying you're not grounded, and your jump code says only jump if you're grounded. So you need to make sure that when you write your own custom gravity for a character controller, that even when you're on the ground, still add a downwards force. And obviously, you're not going to fall through the floor. In real life, when you're standing up on the floor, you still have a force pushing down on you.
Affecting you,
yeah. Gravity doesn't stop affecting you because you're standing up on the ground. So it makes sense. It's not like a weird thing to think. Gravity doesn't just stop the second you touch the ground. All right, I have like one more question. Let's end with this maybe, unless you've got more. I mean,
okay.
Do you guys draw class diagrams before starting a project to get a feel how code should be structured? Do you want to answer that first?
No, but I do turn to drawing when stuff has to like work properly. When I was doing camera, that's like and I wanted it to stop clipping through the geometry. I wanted to make camera that's like floating through the scene, and if you're going into tunnel, for example, it doesn't like collide with the tunnel. So yeah, drawing stuff.
Have you used Cinemachine?
I can even show like no, I don't use Cinemachine. I used my own my own solution for that. And drawing in that sense like really helps if you have like some simple diagrams, just like to visualize what you're trying to do. So like drawing vectors, that I do. But
have you tried using Cinemachine?
I guess I've tried, but I couldn't get it working the way I wanted it.
Okay, because the thing I found with Cinemachine at the start, I considered it like one of those assets where it's, you use it, but then when you want something custom, like to tweak, you have to use your own system. But I found that you can pretty much tweak anything you can think of with Cinemachine, and even then, you can still use their virtual camera, which is just like a normal Unity camera with some extra stuff, and you code the movement, right? It doesn't move for you. You can do that. Because there's a pre-built-in collisions thing that handles, like, if you're going to hit a collider, like, zoom in instead.
Yeah, I've tried that, but still I couldn't get like the same. But it's interesting about that virtual camera you're saying. Yeah, I should check that out. If I could like decouple everything else and like make
because one of the things I used to not like was thinking about coding camera movement and stuff and getting that all working. Now I just import Cinemachine and it works just fine. And because it's I know it's, was it always developed by Unity, or did they buy it like off the people who originally made it? I think it's always been Unity internal.
It's always.
So obviously, because it's a built-in package as well, it's better. Like we were saying, I'd rather use Shader Graph than Shader Forge or Amplify or whatever, because it just feels right when you're in an engine using its own thing. The main reason third-party tools exist is to fill in the gaps that aren't there, or to fill in the gaps but because that Unity's now filling in the gaps, there's kind of less of a use to use those assets. No problem with using them, but but the thing about class diagrams, that's the thing. The reason you need a class diagram is if like you were doing an inheritance tree, and I try and avoid that. Really, I don't find the need. Like I would agree doing that for maybe non-game dev stuff, but that's the thing. Programming like concepts and paradigms, like what you meant to do, is different from in game dev than other areas of development. If you go make a website, you don't make stuff the same way. You don't. So, for example, dependency injection, you can do that in game dev, but most people don't, and it's because even though it's a very common thing in web development to inject your dependencies, in Unity, you drag and drop it. It's the normal way to do things. If your script needs reference to something, you drag it in, or you give it like referencing code somewhere. It's different. The problem with dependency injection is it's almost like a singleton in the sense a singleton is one instance of something and everyone can reference it. Except singletons in Unity, you create a mono behavior that has like a static reference of itself. Like if it's the game manager, you then have a private static game manager. that's at least the way I used to do Singletons when I did.
Mhm.
On a wake,
Yeah.
you say like, if the instance is not null, then destroy myself because there's already one. If not, then set it. That doesn't exist in web development. You don't have mono behaviors and wake callbacks, game objects that exist. It's so different. So yeah, just because you've learned some like paradigm and some way of doing code design in some other area doesn't mean it applies to game dev. A lot of them do, like general principles about separating things out and making it all clean code and all these things. But yeah, just reading. Yeah, I think that's it. Maybe.
Yeah, you can wrap up. Yeah, people are asking what software are we using for the call. It's Discord.
Yeah,
but it's like a throwaway question. So okay, it was great having you.
Yeah, it's a shame.
It was my first stream. It was your second, I guess. Like
yeah, it was my second
like interviewer stream.
Yeah. I'm gonna try and just reach out to more people and try and make this a weekly thing with different creators and just see where it goes.
Yeah,
I think it'd be cool.
Yeah.
And then
maybe maybe we should like figure out a way where we can like show not only talk but show stuff. So a separate window or like overlay it differently. Yeah.
We'll like do proper rehearsals. I mean, I actually tested OBS yesterday, regardless, and it worked. And apparently a new driver update came, and it's like, yeah. So I had internet problems.
That's overnight. Yeah.
It's live stream problems. Like, because if I did a video today, no one would notice that my video came out a little bit later because I had to fix problems with recording.
Yeah.
But because Streamlabs problems with Streamlabs needed me to be on the most recent version of my graphics driver, and apparently I wasn't, but I was last week, so an update came out in the last week. So yeah, I couldn't go live at the start, and then that was just fun, wasn't it? And you had problems with Discord and getting the audio or something, or whatever it was at the start you had problems with, but you know, that's streams and people don't care. That's the best thing. No one cares that there were problems with the stream. No one's in my chat saying, hey, you're late, you know, because it's a live stream. But yeah, I don't know like who I'm going to try and get in contact with for next week. But I guess one thing is every time I talk to someone like Charles, then it's encouraging as well for not just me to go find new people. Like, you know, you could also do this with other people as well. Like get all the different people doing this like with people.
And I see Couch Ferret in my chat. Hi, Jobboard. Nice to see you. Yeah. And he says, like, if I recall correctly, the FPS demo was kind of dots and some custom things. So yeah.
Well, there's two. So there's two FPS demos. That's the thing. There's the one.
Yeah. So maybe maybe he's saying about the latest one. Yeah.
The more recent one was dots, and then they did one a while, like
the recent one,
2 years ago, maybe a year ago. That was non-dots, but I don't know. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well,
so back to our
we never did an intro,
stuff.
so let's do an outro. Our outro is going to be our intro, I guess. Yeah.
I guess. But
well,
I don't know.
It's just a case of telling everyone to check out each other's channels, you know? Because we do different content. That's the thing with Charles. Me and him have similar content, but ours is quite different. I mean, obviously you can talk about your stuff real quickly if you want before we end, and then I'll do the same.
Yeah, I'm currently making my first major title and try to do devlogs about that, but also I add in an occasional Unity tutorial on shaders or something. So check out my channel. I do like a lot of more granular progress stuff on my Twitter. Also check that. And yeah, that's about my channel. Now to you.
Yeah, so I do daily. Well, I would say it's usually Monday through Friday, but now Thursday.
That's savage.
Obviously now on Thursdays. Well, the first two streams I've done, last week's and today's, has been on Thursday. That doesn't mean next week's is going to be Thursday too. We'll try and make it Thursday so it's consistent, but it really depends on people's schedules and whether they can make it. But yeah, the plan is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. I do coding videos. At the moment, I'm doing more beginner stuff than usual, but I still have intermediate and advanced. It's less visually interesting stuff and more like, code design, architecting your game, making mechanics, making systems. I want to start doing some more interesting things than just coding tutorials. I did a while ago. I had fun making mechanics from games, like Andre does from Mix and Jam. He does a lot more on the visual side. I'd like to actually do more on the code side, right? I think I made some
Yeah,
characters
that's
from
a good
Overwatch
idea. That's a cool idea.
and Apex
Yeah.
Legends. It's like making Genji's dash, making Genji's double jump, and wall climb, and these other things. It was quite fun to do. So maybe that's something I can start
Yeah,
doing now. Making some characters from video games abilities. People will love to see that, right? Because a lot of people want to know how to remake mechanics from games they play. And from knowing how to do that, they can then come up with their own mechanics and understand how to start making those.
Yeah, exactly. Build upon that,
Yeah.
and make something unique.
Like once you
Yeah.
know about ray casting and some other collision stuff, like the built-in Unity things, you can make anything. Because at the end of the day, everything you write is
you don't know you don't to know a lot of stuff to start playing games.
Yeah.
Just a few. Yeah.
But yeah, so
Okay, so people are saying nice stream, guys. Just recently found out that they were down a channel, so this stream was a nice surprise. Yeah, it's a nice surprise for all of us. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
obviously,
thank you guys also for keeping the chat alive. I know we've like at times were focused on each other and haven't checked out, but thanks. Yeah, we will read more and maybe like return to some unanswered questions next time, maybe.
yeah. But that's the thing. Obviously, this is the second stream. Hopefully, each one will get better and better. Like,
yeah, exactly.
maybe
yeah.
even like adding segments and like not segments like normal talk shows have like, oh, it's time to do this, and then we'll do something fun with the people. Maybe we'll even have a segment where we show off people in the chat like what they've been making and talk about their stuff. Bring it up on Twitter and whatever. Like during the Unity live stream,
it look cooler to include.
Yeah, we'll get people included on the live stream. Maybe even end up having like people calling in. Like we'll add someone to the call and chat with them for 10 minutes, and then we get the next person. Like people call in.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just it's ideas.
Yeah, it's crazy idea, but yeah,
it's just things we can do.
That's cool.
Or maybe even eventually have multiple creators rather than just two. Like have like 3 or 4 people in a call. I don't know if that would be bad.
Yeah.
Or good.
Yeah. No, that could be awesome. Yeah, like a full-on conference call.
Yeah.
Okay, it was great seeing you.
All right, you too. Yeah, thanks everyone.
Have a great week, and you all, everybody who's joined our stream. Hi to your families.
Check out Roman's channel.
Keep safe. Yeah. Check out the Verdana channel. Okay. Bye, everybody.
See you, everyone. Bye.